The woman in your life will do what she must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily.
Hello everybody and welcome to Women's Spaces. My name is Elaine Holtz and I'm your host. And as always, I am so excited about today's guest. I have a wonderful woman by the name of Gina Cuclis, who just happens to be also running for the Board of Supervisors in District 1 here in Sonoma County. You know, it's just amazing. What I love about Women's Spaces is the fact that we can gather all these wonderful women and hear their stories and find out all about them. You know, it's so important, ladies, that we vote. You know, we live in a democracy and we live in the United States of America, and most people don't realize how lucky we are. There are countries across the globe where people are in revolutions just to get the vote. So it's very, very important, I think, for our women to get out there and to support the candidates that they believe in. And between you and me, we have some great women in this county that are running. You know, I want to flash this picture on the screen, which I think is really interesting, talking about women running and some of the stuff that's going on in our political lives today. But just look at this picture. This is an old suffrage picture. And what do they say? No self-respecting woman should wish or work for the success of a party that ignores her sex. You know, what does that mean, ignores her sex? It means that they pay attention to what her needs are. Her needs, say, for child care, her needs for birth control, her needs for family planning. You know, I can go on and name several things, but I think it's very, very important that we pay attention to the people that are running. And just to, once again, honor our sisters of the past, I just love this picture. You know, it's really, really an interesting picture. It probably was taken over 100 years ago. And just think about it. We have been struggling as women for over 100 years to get our voices heard and to get our needs met. You know, some really interesting things have happened in our county in the last few days that have been very, very disturbing to me, particularly the tragic loss of the woman in Petaluma by the name of Gina Cuclis. You know, here's a woman who left behind 21-month-old twins. I mean, can you imagine that? Plus 2 teenage children. I mean, it just breaks my heart. And this is a killing, and we have to call it what it is. It's a killing, a murder of an innocent woman. And what's also interesting about it is that this is part of a domestic violence situation. It looks like Kim went in front of a judge and tried to get a restraining order against her ex-husband, and it was refused. And my heart goes out to the family. I mean, it's just such a terrible tragedy. But I mentioned it for a dual reason, because there was a very interesting letter to the editor today, and it was a reminder. It was a reminder of to pay attention to these domestic problems. You know, oftentimes a situation arises, and sometimes if you get a little intervening or a little bit of help, you know, situations like this could be avoided. So Madeline Kagan O'Connell, who is the executive director of the YWCA, had a wonderful, wonderful letter to the editor, and I'm recording on the 19th of April. So if you want to look it up on the computer, you can go to the Press Democrat and just look letters to the editor, April 19th. And she reminds us that the YWCA here in Santa Rosa has a 24-hour hotline, and that telephone number is 707-546-1234. That's 707-546-1234. And that's a 24-hour hotline. So if you have any problems with your spouse, or you know of somebody that's having a problem, please remind them that there are programs here in Sonoma County that can help. And like I said, my heart goes out to the Conover family, to those children, and oh, it's just so sad. And then one last thing I'd like to talk about is I had the privilege of going to a meeting with the North Bay Organizing Project. And what was so exciting, it was just so wonderful to be in a room full of activists, you know. And when I say activists, I would just say ordinary citizens who are activists, and all of us talking about issues, talking about problems that are in our county, and then being able to take a vote to see what issues are going to be handled. And I'm very, very proud to announce that there's 3 issues that the North Bay Organizing Project decided to work on. The first issue was to stop deportation. You know, again, families are being broken up, all kinds of things are happening, and we really have to look at it. And I'm not saying I support people being here without documentation, but what I'm saying is that we have to look at what we do before we go in and arrest somebody and put them in jail or take their car away. We have to start looking at it, and the North Bay Organizing Project has definitely decided to do that. And the second thing, which is one of my favorite topics because I'm very heavily involved, I don't know if folks have been reading the paper, but I was actually at several of the meetings where they were trying to discuss the idea of having district elections, and the North Bay Organizing Project decided to take that on as a project too, to work on district elections. And the third thing, which should be close to all our hearts, and that's education. I mean, you know something, if we don't have an educated population, I mean, come on. You know, cutting education for our children, you know, education is so important, particularly in a democracy, because if you're not educated, people aren't educated, they don't even know what the meaning of the word democracy is, or they don't even know, I mean, can you imagine sending people to the polls and they can't read who they're voting for? Well, you know, it can get that bad if you don't have a good educational system. Well, as always, there's tons to think about, and that's the whole purpose of Women's Spaces, is that as women, and as my male viewers also, we all sit down and we think about things, we talk about things, we communicate. You know, communication is also community. You know, they both kind of have the same ring, community, communication. Very, very important. Well, without further ado, I'd like to start communicating with my wonderful guest, Gina Cuclis. Gina, welcome to Women's Spaces.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. And as I announced, you are running along with Susan Gorin and several other candidates for 1st District Supervisor.
Right.
You know, the way I like to start the show is I like to have my guests just tell us a little bit about yourself. Anything that you feel comfortable sharing with our viewers. And remember, this is Women's Spaces.
Yes, thank you. Well, I grew up in a Greek-American home in Oakland. Raised by the children of immigrants. As a matter of fact, my dad used to brag to his grandchildren how he couldn't speak English when he started kindergarten. So I grew up with a dual sense of community. There was the ethnic community of the Greek American community I was part of, my family was a part of, which my dad was very active in. Then there was the broader community in the city of Oakland that my mom was very active in. My mom's been a member of the League of Women Voters for probably 50 years. We moved her to Sonoma, where I live, a couple years ago, so she now belongs to 2 chapters of the League of Women Voters. And when I was a kid, I used to be taken to rallies and letter stuffing events, and a good friend of hers ran for Oakland City Council, and my mom was the campaign treasurer. So I grew up with the sense that being involved in your community and giving back to your community was just part of what you did. It wasn't an afterthought, it was part of what you did.
You know, that's interesting about your mother. I mean, I could see you as a little girl stuffing animals, so it says the envelope. So did that help you be maybe a little bit political when you were going to school or any of those things?
Of course. Well, you know, I have to say I'm older than I look. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s. So I grew up at a time when there was a lot of political involvement and political awareness, and I remember the protests for the Vietnam War and that kind of thing. So, and my mom was a member of Another Mother for Peace. Do you remember Another Mother for Peace?
Oh, definitely.
So I'm of that generation. We call it the cuspers, those of us on the second half of the baby boom. So growing up with that, and growing up with a strong sense of community, of being part of an ethnic community, who also in the greater scheme was interested in politics too. Remember, we did have somebody run for president.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, Gina. You know, I'm also, I'm product of a Jewish immigrant family. You know, it's a little bit different in all the ethnicity that goes with that. And also my father was a union man, so I understand the politics of unions and getting involved, etc. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, certainly. So when I grew up, graduated from high school from Skyline High in Oakland, and went to University of California, Santa Barbara. And that is where actually I started more of my own identity in politics. A roommate and I started the Santa Barbara chapter of Friends of the River. Got very involved. I don't know if you remember, there was a big fight to save the Stanislaus River in Tuolumne County from being flooded by a dam. And then when I graduated from college, I actually ended up getting a job, a temporary job for the summer working for Friends of the River. And the work I did was actually documented in a book. I have the book still. My picture and name of what I did that summer was in a national book. So my environmental activism, we might talk more about that today too, is I'm documenting the book. And my love story started there too. I met my husband, who was working as a river guide on the Stanislaus River in the summer of 1980, and we got married in the summer of 1983. And we have twin daughters, our identical twin daughters, who are now freshmen in college. They graduated from Sonoma Valley High last year. We moved to Sonoma County. I won't take the whole time, but
no, go ahead.
In very late 1986 is when we moved to Sonoma County, and to Sonoma Valley specifically. We were renting an apartment in Glen Ellen then, and we originally thought it was going to be temporary. He was a graduate student had just gotten his graduate degree at UC Berkeley and had what was started out as a temporary job there, and I had moved from Humboldt County, where I'd worked in radio up there. And anyway, we ended up staying, bought our first home in Boys Hot Springs on Siesta Way in 1990. The twins were born in 1993, and the rest is history.
Well, you know, you sound a little bit like me there too. I moved up to go to Sonoma State, and I definitely thought it was also temporary. And here I am, some 35 years later. But you know, you can't help yourself. This is such a beautiful, beautiful county. Well, you know, I went on your website and I looked at some of the involvements, and I mean, it's just amazing how many things that you have been involved in since you, like you said, you moved up in the late 90s.
And late end of 1986.
End of 1986, and here you are. You've been on the Sonoma City Planning Commission, the Sonoma Valley Healthcare District Strategic Planning Committee, you know, Sonoma County Prevention Partnership Policy Subcommittee. I remember that committee. That's amazing. And then also co-founder of Verano Springs Association. And on I can go. And I notice now that you also campaigned very heavily for the Measure O, which is an amazing thing for the smart train.
Measure Q, right?
So what of all the things you did, what are one or two of the favorite things that you've been involved in, or you feel that you've had the most impact?
That's a good question. I want to go back to 1992. How I really got active in Sonoma County and Sonoma Valley. So my husband and I bought our first house in 1990. And we started meeting like-minded neighbors and friends, and we were very much in tune with what life was like when you don't live in a city and you live in one of the unincorporated towns of our county, and all what you have is your one county supervisor. This is part of the motivation for why I'm running today. I know what it means when that's all your local government is your one county supervisor to take your local issue or concern to. So in that process, we had an area that we felt underserved. A lot of empty storefronts, attention was not paid to infrastructure, had some real economic development issues. We decided the only way to address it was to organize, form a community association, to have a voice to then pressure the county, and specifically our county supervisor at that time, who was Mike Kale. So I and other people in this group who got this Verano Springs Association started, we went door to door in our neighborhoods. Now this is 1992, I am pregnant with my twins, knocking on doors in my neighborhood saying to my neighbors, hey, join us, we're forming a community association, have a voice, and what would you like to see improved in your community? And that's the kind of supervisor I'm going to be. I believe in that, involving at the grassroots level. I've been having those kinds of conversations ever since.
No, that's very interesting that you say that, because that's one of my favorite things is involvement. You know, I'm on the community advisory board, you know, and that's a whole other thing about trying to get the communities involved. Can you just tell us one or two things? What did you find as you were knocking on doors, as you were finding out things about people? what was the one thing that got people engaged, that made them want to go on your committee and work with you?
Just the fact that there was somebody else who felt like they did. That sense of joining together. If we work together, maybe we could accomplish something. There were people who felt energized by that because nobody had ever done that before. We were the first at a time when nobody had really organized the area. And just that alone made a lot of people show up to meetings because they were curious. They were curious.
That's interesting, because another thing too, that's another thing about the North Bay Organizing Project. I think they just did they came together where they're bringing all the groups together so they could work together. Well, thanks for answering that, because I do think that is so important that we pay attention. Oftentimes our city council, our board of supervisors, they seem like this group of people up there. They don't realize that they're human beings just like us. Well, let's get into a little bit more deeper about the supervisor.
Sure.
Why is it that you're running? I mean, a lot of work. You got to do fundraising, all these things. What makes you want to be supervisor?
Well, I tell you, I started that. My motivation is at the nugget that I just described, because I know what it means when county government is your local government, when that's all you have. 30% of us in Sonoma County, that's our government. We don't live in the cities. So let's talk about Santa Rosa, for example. Santa Rosa, you have 7 members of your city council. You get to vote for all 7 of them. Something to think about. If you have district elections, you could lose that. But you have 7 people to go to. So maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 out of 7 you feel comfortable with. But for those of us who don't live in the cities, all we have is our one county supervisor. Now in my district, in the 1st district, that's huge. We have over 1/3 of the population. We have all these towns from Kenwood to Shellville, unincorporated Bennett Valley, out the Rankin Valley. We are the ones who put the demands on the 1st district supervisor. The person who enters that office needs to know the phone calls you're going to get, the complaints you're going to get, the issues. So that's motivates me, as well as, and so wanting to move from being an activist and being in all these appointed positions. You identified some of the positions I was in. I wanted to say is when I became president of that community association, and I have a lot of the support for my candidacy now comes from that past. It comes from people who saw me in those days, who saw me run meetings, who saw me organize the community to get things done. And so that's just what motivates me, and that drive to be involved, don't sit around and complain, get involved and take action to help make things better.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Don't sit around and complain. Get off your duff, do something. And not only that, something, I have to tell you, I have to say that when you do get involved, it's just a lot of fun, because you get to meet people. You don't feel as depressed. You don't feel as isolated. And you begin to see that there are like minds out there. Well, you've already mentioned some things about what you think is important that a county supervisor, particularly in your district, should have. But what are some, besides that, what are some important issues that you feel need to be worked on, that as a supervisor that you could help support and maybe bring into being?
Right, exactly. Well, because I live in the unincorporated area, one problem I've heard about for years and years and years and years is the status of our roads. They've gone from bad to worse to hazardous. You ought to see what I have to drive on to get from my house to come to Santa Rosa. It's just years of neglect and years of not wanting to have the conversation with the voters, and particularly with the residents and the property owners, about why the roads have gotten so bad. It's an issue if we have nearly 1,900 miles of roads, and we are just, the state funding formula that cities and counties rely on to fund roads greatly penalizes Sonoma County for how rural we are, the number of roads, miles that we have, and we just don't have the cars and buy the gasoline like they do in urban areas. So it's not a formula that works. Excuse me, it's why there's not been enough money. And nobody ever wanted to show the leadership to how it's a difficult conversation to have with your community and your taxpayers about that there has to be local revenue generated to fix the roads. So as somebody who owns property in the unincorporated area, who lives with the problem, who thinks possibly her own property values could be improved if the roads were improved, I think I bring credibility to that issue, to lead on that issue at the county level, to be out there talking with the homeowners and the property owners in the unincorporated areas about what it's going to take to fix our roads.
Is there any other issue
that
you have passion for?
Yes. Well, I want to say, excuse me, I look at this, I'm going to talk on a bigger level for a second. What concerns me is, do we have a board of supervisors, or will we have a board of supervisors that could make the best decisions possible for all of us in Sonoma County? If we don't have a board where all regional perspectives and voices are represented. Now, all the other 4 members of the board, they all live in cities. 2 live in the city of Santa Rosa. Currently, Valerie Brown, who's retiring, it's her seat that I'm running to fill. She lives in Kenwood. So when she goes off the board, if we don't replace her with somebody else with the perspective of living outside of cities, and don't replace her with somebody who comes from Sonoma Valley, understands here Sonoma Valley issues, will we have a board that is truly representative of all of Sonoma County? So that's a higher level issue. Another issue you hear a lot, everybody's talking about this, and that's pension reform. We need pension reform so that we have money, all the money that not all the money, that we have more money for services. And the taxpayers, the voters, it's the #1 thing nowadays all over the district. I keep hearing, I'm asked about over and over again by the voters about pension reform. So we need to do that. And then we need, excuse me, I'm very concerned about the shredding of the social safety net. It's the county's a real leader in that. The county and working with the community-based organization and providing our human and social services and our health services, that working together collaboratively to prevent the shredding of the social safety net. I'm very concerned about that also.
You know, it's really scary what's going on in the world today, and you know, one of my opinions is we do have the money. It's just that we're not prioritizing the money. We're putting it in places that maybe are not for the best interest of the citizens and seem to be serving, how do I put this without taking any side or anything, that seem to be serving interest groups that maybe are not for the whole. You know, it's more just for a select group. So it sounds like you have a little bit more of a handle on what direction maybe your area has to handle, and that's what I'm hearing you saying. You know, we're coming to the end of the show, and time goes by very quickly when you have fun. So what I would like you to do, it's just been a wonderful interview and wonderful getting to know you. You know, that's the exciting, and I hope my listeners, my viewers also have that opportunity. I have to tell you that Women's Spaces was once on the radio, so I always have a hard time going listener, viewer, listener, viewer.
Okay.
So look at this. Okay. Go and look at this camera. Anything that's in your heart, anything that you feel comfortable saying, just be my guest.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, I've really appreciated being here. And if you are a voter in my district, I hope that you will keep in mind what Elaine and I have talked about. I think it's very critical, this idea of, do we truly have a board of supervisors that truly represents all of Sonoma County? I've lived in the unincorporated area of Sonoma Valley 25 years. You've heard Elaine and I talk about my involvement. We haven't had an opportunity today to touch on healthcare, but that's an issue I've had a lot of experience and involvement with. So I'm looking forward to serving all of the residents of Sonoma County as the next 1st District Supervisor.
Well, Gina, thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming on Women's Spaces, and I wish you all the luck in the world with your election.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been an honor being here.
Thank you so much. And to my viewers, wow, so interesting, you know, listening to all the different perspectives. It's going to be hard, I know, to make a decision, but you know, the way I feel about it, it's better to make a decision and get in there and vote, you know, than not to vote at all. One of the things I was telling a friend of mine is, if you don't feel like voting, you know, if that's the way you protest, you stay home, please don't do that. That is not a protest, because what you're saying is that you really don't care about what happens. Maybe in your mind you're saying, oh well, I'm protesting, the system is broken, or whatever kind of logic that you have. But you know, when you stay home and you don't vote, you're really saying, I don't care and do whatever you want. And I don't believe in do whatever you want, because you know there's a lot of people that have been doing whatever they want, and look at the problems that we have. So you really have to pay attention to who you're voting for. And I'm a little bit biased, I have to admit it. You know, Valerie Brown is a woman. I would like to see a woman replace her in the 1st district. I mean, I can't help but say that. And I know it's the voters' choice. There's some fine men running too, and I have nothing against them. But I just think that there's just a certain perspective that women bring into the mix, and it's very interesting to me. And like I do at the end of all my shows, I try to encourage, particularly my women viewers, to get off your duff and do something for peace. Do something for the children. You know, you look at people like Gina here sitting in all the committees she's on. I mean, she's walking from door to door with these twins. I mean, can you imagine what she'd look like walking, knocking on doors with these children inside of her? I mean, it's amazing, but that's determination. But she wasn't only walking for herself. She was walking for the children. She was walking for her children so they could have a future. I'm on women's spaces so my children and my grandchildren can have a future. I mean, it's that simple to me, folks. It's very important to get involved. And the very least you can do is go out and vote in June, and then there'll be another election in November that's going to be for the president and all the other offices across the United States. It's just a very, very interesting time. And like I do, I try to encourage, particularly my women viewers, get off your duff, you know, and you can do something real simple. You got a pen, you pick up the pen and you write a letter. Write a letter to the editor. You know, that gets your opinion out there. Write a letter to your congressman. Write a letter to your senator. Write a letter to your local people. Write a letter to the President of the United States. And make one simple suggestion, and that is, before they make that important vote or before they write that important bill, they ask one simple question: is it good for the children? Because you know, if it's not good for the children, we shouldn't do it. Why? Because if it's not good for the children, it's not good for the future. That's how simple it is to me. And you know, we get so complicated. You know, we hear this opinion and we hear that opinion and we hear this opinion. But the most important question should be, is it good for the children? Is it good for the future? You know, the Native Americans said 7 generations. Why did they say that? Because they wanted to make sure that there would be some stability and some life left for the children that they brought forward. Well, there's a lot to think about, and I hope we're all out there thinking. The weather is certainly beautiful. Here it is, April 19th, and we're having 84 degrees. Well, it's very interesting, you know, and I'm glad I don't live back east. That's all I can say. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching, and as I always do at the end of the show, I say, this is Elaine Holtz with Women's Spaces, and I will see you the next time.
In your life, we'll do what you must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily. She knows everything you do because the